Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Inain's Forensic Classroom. So today we will be continuing our last topic, which is crime scene photography, and today we will understand the basics of photography that every forensic photographer must understand. We will cover ISO, aperture. Then we will also learn about shutter speed and depth of field. We will also look into what is white balance and the image format. Okay. Now, this is the section that most forensic science and criminology courses cover very superficially, but for your knowledge, you need to understand these concepts properly. Okay, let's go through each of these carefully. Now, let's start with the ISO. Okay, now look at these two pictures, these two photographs that are on your screen. Okay, you have a same subject, which is this tower. Okay, but you have two different results. Now, this left image is very clean, it's very sharp, right? And this right one image is very grainy and it's very degraded. Now, this difference is caused entirely by ISO. Now, ISO basically refers to the sensitivity of the camera sensor to the light. Now, if you have a low ISO like 100 or ISO 200, now this means that you have a very low sensitivity, which produces very clean, sharp, and detailed images. And if you have a higher ISO like 1600 or 3200, it means that you have a high sensitivity, and this is used in low light, but it introduces the grain or noise, basically this speckled or degraded appearance that you can see here. Now, in crime scene photography, the goal is always to use the lowest ISO possible. Now, if the scene is dark, you have to improve the lighting, right? Do not simply raise the ISO, because you will get a grainy photograph. You will miss the fine details that are very critical to the investigation. Then let's talk about the aperture. Now, the diagram basically that you see on your screen here shows you the aperture at a glance. Now, you can look at the opening sizes, right? These are very different opening sizes that are on your screen, from f2.8 all the way to f22. Now, this aperture basically refers to the size of the opening in the lenses through which the light enters. Now, this is measured in f-stops, and that is why you can see this f written here. So here is the key thing to remember. When you see a lower f number, it means you have a larger opening, and a higher f number means you have a smaller opening. Now, this seems counterintuitive, but it is very important. If you have a larger aperture, if you have a larger aperture like in f by 2.8, it basically lets in more light, and it creates a very shallow depth of field, which means that only a small area is in sharp focus while the background is blurred. Right now, a small aperture, basically like of f by 16 or f by 22, it lets in less light, but it keeps most of the scene in the sharp focus. Now, in forensic photography, the wrong aperture choice can either blur your important background context, or it can fail to isolate the evidence clearly enough for the court. Then we will move on to the shutter speed. Now look at these pictures. These are the photographs of the same person. Now at 1 by 2/50th of a second, the image is very sharp and frozen. Now as the shutter speed slows down, like of 1 by 60, 1 by 30, 1 by 15, or the image becomes progressively more blurred. Now shutter speed is basically how long the camera's shutter remain open. Okay, how long the camera shutter remain open. Basically, it controls how long the sensor is exposed to light. Now, if you have a faster shutter speed, it freezes the motion, and a slower shutter speed lets in more light, but it requires a tripod because any camera movement, it causes a blur. Now, in crime scenes, especially in nighttime outdoor scenes or dimly lit indoor scenes, longer exposures are needed in order to capture sufficient detail. And this is exactly why a tripod is mandatory in crime scene photography. Basically, a handheld long exposure will always produce a blurred, unusable image. Now let's move on to the depth of field. Okay, now this diagram basically shows you exactly what depth of field means visually. If you can see here in the top image, we have a larger aperture. Notice how only this rabbit is in sharp, while all of this, fades away. And in the bottom picture, you can see here that all of the trees, including the rabbit, is in a sharp focus from front to back, right? Now, this depth of field is basically the range of the distance within a photograph that appears acceptably sharp. It is controlled by the aperture, but also by the distance between the camera and the subject and the focal length of the lens. Now, in crime scene photography, this is especially critical for close-ups and macro photography. Now, when photographing tiny evidences like a fingerprint or a fiber, the depth of field becomes extremely shallow, sometimes just a few millimeters, so that the photographer must focus very precisely, and they may need multiple shots at slightly different focus points to capture all the detail. Then we will move on to the white balance. Okay, now look at this image. It is the same photograph which is taken under the same conditions, but with the four different white balance settings. Okay, now notice how dramatically the color changes across each version, right? Now, white balance basically refers to the camera's ability to accurately reproduce the colors under different lighting conditions. Now, you have a different light sources, for example, sunlight, fluorescent, or flashlights, all have different color temperatures, and they can shift how colors appear. Now, in crime scene photography, correct white balance is absolutely critical, especially when the color of the evidence matters. Now, if you have a color of blood or bruising or chemical stains, they all of this must be accurately represented. If you have an incorrect white balance, it can make a red blood appear orange or brown, and it can create confusion and raise serious questions in the court of law. Now, forensic photographers use color calibration cards, which are also called as gray cards. Basically, it ensures colors are accurately reproduced across all the photographs. Okay, now let's talk about the two file formats that we use in forensic science, which is JPG and RAW. Now, this is extremely important for your exams as well. Now, see, when a camera captures an image, it can save it in different file formats, and these two are the uh, file formats basically. Now look at these two versions of the same lighthouse photograph, right? But at the first glance, they look similar, but these are fundamentally different files. Now, this left one is a JPG file, which is a compressed format where the camera processes and discards image data to create a smaller file. Now, the lost data cannot be recovered. Now, when you look at this right one, we have a raw file which is completely uncompressed. It preserves every single bit of data which is captured by the camera sensor with absolutely no processing or compression. Now, raw files are larger, but they contain the maximum possible image detail and can be adjusted after capture without any loss of quality. Now, in forensic photography, raw format is always preferred because you can see here as well, it maintains the highest possible quality, and it critically preserves the original unaltered data from the camera sensor, which is very important for providing authenticity in the court of law. Now, raw files are also harder to tamper with undetectably than JPJs, which makes them far more legally defensible. Now, we will talk about the photo log. Now, every photograph which is taken at a crime scene must be recorded in a photo log, which is basically a written record that documents the photograph number, description of what is shown, date and time, name and designation of the photographer, the camera settings that are used, the direction the camera was facing, and the distance from the subject. Now, this log is part of the official case file and is essential for establishing the authenticity and admissibility of the photographs in the court under the Bharatiya Sakshi Adhiniyam 2023. Now, if a photograph cannot be accounted for in a photo log, it can be challenged and potentially excluded as the evidence entirely. Now, that's all for this video. I'll see you in the next one, where we will talk about the types of cameras, the types of lens, and all of that. So if this video has helped you, please like, share, and subscribe to Inain's Forensic Classroom. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.